This is my original story, written from imagination, not a real event. What you're about to hear is a slow, emotional fantasy tale, one filled with mystery, quiet danger, and an unexpected bond between two very different worlds. I never planned to cross paths with royalty, and I certainly never expected to be remembered by a queen. Yet there I was, standing in a place where humans were never meant to survive, carrying a life that was supposed to be untouchable. This is not a story of glory or conquest. It's a story about a single moment that changed everything, about fear, responsibility, and a choice made when no one else was left to make it. The world I stepped into was ancient and unforgiving, ruled by shadows and silence. Every breath felt like a mistake, every step felt watched. And at the center of it all was a queen who had never needed help from anyone. Until she did, what followed was not loud or heroic in the way legend described. It was quiet, heavy, and unforgettable. This story moves slowly, building tension through emotion rather than force. It's serious, immersive, and deeply human at its core. Even when surrounded by the unreal, what began as an act of survival soon became something far more dangerous, being remembered. And it all began on the night I chose not to walk away, but to lift her up and take the first step forward into the dark.
Moonlight in an ancient palace is never just light. It is history made visible, silver and cold, sliding across stone that has listened to secrets for centuries. It finds the edges of carved pillars, the ribs of vaulted ceilings, the thorn filigree of wrought iron balconies. It drifts through tall arched windows and breaks into beams so delicate they look like threads. In those beams, dust floats like slow-falling snow, each particle an unspoken word. Tonight, that moonlight enters a hall of nocturnes, the oldest chamber in the palace of Vespera. It pours across an inlaid floor of black marble and pale onyx, patterned like a star map that no living astronomer could recognize. It glances off 1,000 small silver ornaments, Gothic roses, crescent moons, and ancient heraldry, then climbs the dais where a throne stands. And there, in the heart of this quiet grandeur, the vampire queen is not seated like a monarch. She is standing unsteady. The fact itself is a scandal against nature. Queen Serylith of House Knox is known for stillness, for composure, so complete it seems carved from alabaster, for silver eyes that can watch a room without blinking and make even the bold forget their own names. Her skin is pale porcelain, perfect as a statue, and her hair, long, dark, glossy, falls like a curtain down her back. She is wearing a gown that would make a cathedral jealous, black velvet and deep midnight silk, cut with subtle Gothic flourishes, stitched with faint patterns that suggest wings and thorns if you stare long enough. Around her throat lies a necklace of moonstone that catches the light as if it remembers the sky, but her hand is pressed to her side, not dramatically, not theatrically, not like a queen performing pain, like someone who is trying not to fall. And in her posture, in the slight tremor of her fingers, there is something that has no rightful place inside an immortal palace. Vulnerability. The courtiers are gone. The guards dismissed. The palace is quiet because the palace has been told to be quiet. Only one person remains in the hall with her, a human man. He does not kneel. He does not tremble. He stands close enough to catch her if she collapses, and when he places his arm around her back, he does it not as a subject touching a forbidden monarch, but as a person supporting another person, careful, precise, protective. His face is lit by the moon in a way that makes all human features look a little more honest. Strong jaw, tired eyes, a calm focus that feels practiced rather than proud. He wears simple traveling clothes, darkened from rain and road dust, the fabric torn in one place and hastily repaired in another. He looks out of place among all this royal elegance, like a candle brought into a tomb. Yet he holds a vampire queen, as if it is the most natural thing in the world. Serylith's silver gaze is locked on him, wide with an expression that is rare enough to be legend, shock, and in the spaces between her breaths, something else tries to form. Gratitude, the palace, which has seen wars and coronations and betrayals, seems to lean in to listen, because the impossible has happened. A human saved her life, and now the story must decide what that means. His name is Lucinarlo. That name will someday be written in ink so dark it shines. It will be whispered in taverns and burned into prayers. It will be carved into stone by hands that fear it, and kissed like a relic by lips that believe in miracles. But tonight, he is simply a man standing in a hall too grand for him, feeling the weight of a queen's body against his arm and the weight of her entire world pressing down from the vaulted ceiling. "I should be dead," Sarah says softly. Her voice is music with a blade hidden inside it, beautiful, controlled, and meant to cut through lies. Even weakened, it fills the hall with authority. But the words themselves are not commands. They are disbelief. Lucen doesn't look away. He doesn't pretend to be impressed by her immortality. He keeps his eyes on her face the way a healer watches for fever. "Then don't be," he replies. It is a simple sentence, human in its bluntness. It makes the vampire queen blink, as if she has been slapped with sincerity. "You do not understand," she murmurs. "What came for me was not meant to be survived." Lucen adjusts his grip slightly, mindful of how light she feels. Too light, like a creature made more of memory than flesh. He can feel her gown's fabric under his fingers, rich and cool. "I understand enough," he says. "You were bleeding." Saralith's eyes flash faintly at the word, a reflex of centuries of concealment. "No blood," she says quickly, as if correcting an insult. "Not in the way you think. Not like that." Lucen nods once. He had noticed. There had been no crimson, no horror, only something darker, an ache in the air itself, a crack in the queen's presence, as if her immortality had been punctured. He had seen her silver eyes dim, her breath falter, her composure fracture at the edges. It had not been violence. It had been something stranger, a kind of death that left no stain, the kind of death that monarchs fear most. Quiet. Whatever it was, Lucen says, "It's over. For now." Saralith draws a slow breath. Moonlight finds the curve of her cheek, the line of her throat. She looks away, as if the hall itself is suddenly too intimate. "No," she whispers. "It is not over. It has only been interrupted." Then, for the first time, she meets his gaze not as a ruler surveying a subject, but as a being staring into an unknown. "Why did you do it?" she asks. Lucen's lips press together, thoughtful. He could say, because it was right. He could say, because he couldn't help himself. He could say, because he saw a woman, not a monster. But the truth is more inconvenient. "I didn't know who you were," he admits. "Not at first." That makes her laugh. Just once, a sound like a shard of ice falling into water. "And if you had known?" Lucen's answer comes after a heartbeat. "I still would have done it." The queen's expression shifts again. Shock, then something more fragile. The kind of emotion immortals forget how to wear. Outside the arched windows, the moon continues its silent vigil. The dust floats. The palace waits. And somewhere in the dark corridors beyond the hall, something else waits too. Something that tried to kill the vampire queen without ever touching her. Something that does not like being interrupted. The night had begun as a diplomatic performance. Vespera Palace had lit its chandeliers with which fire, not for warmth but for spectacle. Its corridors had filled with soft footsteps and murmured alliances. The vampire queen had hosted emissaries from distant courts, silk-robed necromancers in the hollow reaches, veiled witches from the mirror marsh, pale aristocrats from the frost-bound northern keeps. Even a handful of humans had been invited, not as equals, but as curiosities and trade partners, necessary for treaties involving grain, iron, and salt. Lucen had been one of those humans. Not a noble, not an ambassador, not a political mind. He had been hired as an escort for a merchant caravan, and then, because the world is built on odd chains of coincidence, he had been selected to deliver a sealed letter directly to the palace steward. He had accepted because the coin was good and because he did not believe in ghost stories. He believed in roads, in hunger, in the way winter steals the fingers of the careless. He believed in bandits and broken wheels. He believed in sickness that took children and never returned them. He believed in grief that sat in the chest like a stone. Vampires, to him, were tales meant to frighten drunks into leaving the tavern before midnight. And then the gates of Vespera Palace had opened. They had not creaked like old horror stories. They had swung wide with the silent confidence of wealth. The palace had been carved from black stone that looked almost purple under the moon, as if it had swallowed sunsets. Its towers rose like organ pipes, each window a dark eye. Its courtyards were lined with statues of angels whose faces had been smoothed away, leaving only wings and sorrow. Inside, the air was cool but not cold, scented faintly with roses and old books. The servants moved like shadows, not rushed, not fearful, simply efficient. The guests spoke in low tones, as if loudness itself were vulgar. Lucien had walked through it all with his letter in hand, feeling the wrongness of his own heartbeat in a place that seemed to prefer silence. He had delivered the letter. He should have left. But the steward, a thin, elegant vampire with gloves so white they looked surgical, had smiled and said, "The Queen enjoys meeting unusual humans." Lucien had almost laughed. He had wanted to say, "I am not unusual, I am just tired." But he had followed anyway, because refusing royal curiosity is dangerous whether the royal is human or not. He had been led into the Hall of Nocturnes, and there, on her throne, she had been waiting. Queen Serlith. She had looked at him with silver eyes that seemed to read the shape of his life. Her gown had pulled around her like night itself. The room had bowed to her presence. Lucien had felt his throat go dry, not because she was beautiful, though she was, in the way storms are beautiful, but because she looked like someone who had never had to ask permission to exist. The steward had introduced Lucien. Serlith had listened with the stillness of a hunting cat. When Lucien finished his awkward, respectful greeting, she had tilted her head slightly and said, "You smell like rain and ash." Lucien had blinked. "I traveled through the bun fields. There was a fire there last spring." She had murmured. "Humans keep setting the world on fire, and then you wonder why you cannot breathe." It was not cruelty. It was observation. Lucien had surprised himself by answering honestly. "Sometimes we set on fire because we're cold." Serlith had stared at him for a long moment. Then, to the shock of her court, she had smiled. It had been subtle, almost imperceptible, but the hall had reacted to it like a temple reacting to blasphemy. The witches had shifted. The vampires had watched more closely. The human emissaries had gone pale. Because the vampire queen did not smile at humans, not unless she intended to feed on them. Lucien, ignorant of the unspoken rules, had only felt the strange sensation of being seen. That had been the first crack, the first moment where the story began to tilt toward the impossible. Later, after the diplomatic performance ended and guests drifted away like smoke, Lucien had found himself wandering a corridor he was not meant to wander, not because he was foolish, but because the palace was a maze designed to make outsiders lost. He had been looking for the servant assigned to guide him back to the guest wing. Instead, he found a door that was slightly open. From inside came a sound that did not belong in a palace, a sharp intake of breath, like someone fighting dizziness. Lucien hesitated. He could have closed the door and walked away. He could have pretended he heard nothing, because interfering in vampire affairs is an excellent way to die. But the sound came again, and it was unmistakably human in its panic. Before he could reason himself out of it, Lucien pushed the door open. The room beyond was not a bedroom, not a council chamber, not a library. It was a chapel, a Gothic chapel built inside the palace, with tall windows and a ceiling like folded wings. Candles burned without flame, their light blue and soft. At the altar stood a single figure in royal black, Queen Serlith. She was gripping the edge of the altar, so hard her fingers looked bloodless. Her head was bowed. Her hair spilled forward like ink. Her breathing was wrong, too shallow, too forced. And in the air around her, something felt fractured. Lucien's skin prickled, as if the room itself had been struck by unseen lightning. Serlith lifted her head slightly, sensing him. Her silver eyes found his. In that instant, Lucien expected fury. Instead, he saw fear. Not fear of him. Fear of whatever was inside the room with them. "Leave," she whispered. It was not a command. It was a warning. Lucien should have obeyed. But behind her, in the shadows of the chapel, the darkness moved. Not like a creature stepping forward, like a thought becoming visible. A whisper thick enough to be seen. It crawled along the stone walls, clung to the stained glass, pulled at the base of the altar. The candles flickered, as if they were holding their breath. Lucien's heart hammered, and he did the only thing he knew how to do when terror tried to freeze him. He stepped closer. "What is that?" he demanded, voice low, as if loudness would provoke it. Serlith's lips parted. For the first time since Lucen had met her, she looked truly young, not in body, but in the way shock strips away centuries of rehearsed expression. "It is an oath," she said, "come to collect." The darkness surged. Saralitha's knees buckled. Lucen moved without thinking. He caught her, one arm bracing her back, the other around her waist. Her body was cold to the fabric, but there was a pulse in her wrist when his hand brushed it, faint, stubborn. The darkness struck, not at Lucen, not at her, but at the air around her, tightening like a noose. Saralith gasped. Lucen felt it too then, a pressure against the chest, as if invisible hands were trying to squeeze the breath out of the room. He could not fight shadows. He had no magic, no blessed weapons, no holy relics. He only had his hands, his voice, and the simple stubbornness of a man who had survived winters that tried to kill him. Lucen looked at the altar. On it lay a bowl of moonstone water, shimmering faintly. He had no idea what it was for, but something in him recognized the shape of ritual. Bowl, altar, candles, silence heavy with meaning. "Tell me what to do," he hissed. Saralitha's eyes rolled slightly, her strength slipping. "You cannot," she rasped. "It is bound to me, to my name, to my crown." Lucen swallowed fear, then unbind it. He snapped, not respectfully, not carefully, "Or I'm going to do something stupid and get us both killed." For a moment, Saralitha's gaze sharpened. Despite her weakness, something ancient and amused flickered there. "You speak to me," she breathed, "like I am mortal." "Right now," Lucen said, "you look mortal enough." The darkness tightened. Saralitha's head fell against his shoulder. Her gown smelled faintly of night-blooming flowers and old stone. Lucen reached for the bowl. The moonstone water was cold. He dipped his fingers into it and felt a strange sting, like touching pure winter. He did not know what he was doing. So he did what humans have always done when facing forces they cannot understand. He made meaning anyway. He lifted his wet fingers and traced a simple symbol on Saralitha's forehead. Nothing holy, nothing ancient, just a circle with a line through it, the mark his mother used to draw on his brow when he was sick, telling him, "This is where the fever ends. This is where you come back to me." The darkness hesitated. Lucen stared at it, furious. "You don't get to take her," he whispered. "Not tonight." The candles flared blue-white. The pressure in the room shifted. Saralith gasped, drawing a breath as if she had been drowning. The darkness recoiled, shrinking, unraveling, as if confused by a human gesture that had no rightful power. And then, like smoke caught in a sudden wind, it vanished. Silence crashed into the chapel. Lucen stood there, holding the vampire queen, his hands shaking now that the danger had retreated. He looked down at her, expecting her to pull away, to lash out, to regain her regal cruelty. Instead, she stared up at him with silver eyes wide in shock. "You," she whispered. Lucen's voice came out rough. "You're welcome." It was a foolish thing to say to a vampire queen, but it was honest, and honesty, it turned out, was a kind of magic. Now, in the Hall of Nocturnes, that moment still hangs between them like suspended glass. Saralith is leaning on him, forced to accept the indignity of support. Lucen is holding her with careful strength, forced to accept the intimacy of touching a creature his people have feared for generations. Outside, the palace sleeps. Inside, a new kind of danger awakens. Saralitha's voice is quiet when she speaks again. "You do not know what you have done," she says. Lucen shifts, guiding her toward the throne. He helps her sit, slowly, gently. When she is settled, he does not immediately step away. He stays close enough to catch her again. "I know I stopped you from falling," he says. "That feels like enough for one night." Saralitha's fingers tighten around the armrest. "It was not a fainting spell," she says sharply, then softens, as if remembering he is not one of her courtiers. "It was a binding, an old one, older than this palace." Lucen watches her face. "Who bound you?" A shadow crosses her expression. "My mother," she says. The words land like a cold stone dropped into water. Lucen's brows knit. "Your mother tried to kill you?" Saralitha's laugh is bitter this time. "No, she tried to save herself. She was a queen too, and queens make bargains." Lucen leans against the edge of the dais. careful not to seem too familiar, but too tired to pretend he isn't. What kind of bargain? Saralitha's silver eyes flick to the windows. Moonlight glints off her necklace. A covenant with the Night Court, she says. Lucen frowns. I thought you were the Night Court. Saralitha's gaze sharpens. We borrow the word night the way humans borrow God. We use it until we forget it belonged to something else first. Lucen's mouth goes dry. So there's something older than vampires. Yes, Saralith whispers, and it has been patient. She closes her eyes briefly, as if feeling the echo of the chapel's pressure still on her skin. My mother promised my life to them, she says. Not my death, my life, my reign, my obedience. In exchange, they spared her kingdom from ruin. Lucen stares at her. And you didn't know? Saralith opens her eyes again. The shock in them has faded, replaced by something darker. Fury held in a velvet glove. I knew there was a price, she says. I did not know the price was me. Lucen exhales slowly. And tonight was when they came to collect. Saralith nods once. On the anniversary of my coronation, she says. How poetic. Lucen's jaw tightens. Then why weren't your guards there? Saralitha's gaze lowers, and for a moment the queen looks ashamed. Because I dismissed them, she admits. I did not want witnesses. I did not want my court to see me struggle. I did not want to give them the satisfaction of my weakness. Lucen's voice is gentle now, despite the fear still clawing at his ribs. And then I walked in. Saralith looks up at him. And then you walked in, she echoes. A pause stretches between them. Dust floats in moonlight like drifting ash. Lucen rubs his hands together, as if trying to wipe off the memory of that darkness. So what happens now? Saralitha's eyes gleam, reflective as knives. Now, she says, they will try again. Lucen swallows. And you can't stop them? Saralitha's lips press together, pride warring with truth. I have power, she says, more than you can imagine. But covenants are different. They are written into the bones of fate. Lucen's gaze flicks toward the throne, toward the crown resting beside it. Black metal shaped like thorns and crescents. Can't you just refuse? Saralith looks at him, as if he has suggested she refuse gravity. You do not refuse a covenant, she says softly, not without consequence. Lucen's voice tightens. What consequence? Saralitha's answer is barely audible. War. By dawn, Lucen should have been gone. But dawn in Vespera is not a sunrise. It is simply the sky turning from black to bruise violet. The palace does not celebrate it. The vampires retreat deeper into shadowed chambers, and curtains thicker than gilt are drawn. Lucen is given a room in the guest wing, though it feels more like a velvet-lined cage. A servant brings him food he cannot taste, because his mind is still in that chapel with its unseen noose. He lies on the bed fully clothed, staring at the ceiling carved with winged saints. He should be terrified. He is. But there is something else, too, a sensation he cannot name. Not attraction, not ambition, not even pity. A strange ache, because when he held Saralith, he felt how alone she was. A queen surrounded by power, bound by a bargain she did not make, hunted by something older than her immortality, and too proud to let anyone see her bleed in ways that leave no blood. Lucen closes his eyes. In the darkness behind his eyelids, he sees her silver eyes wide with shock. Not because she almost died, because a human cared. He falls asleep, wondering what kind of world requires such a shock. When he wakes, it is still dim. A knock comes at his door, soft, polite. Lucen opens it and finds the palace steward, expression unreadable. The queen requests your presence, the steward says. Lucen's stomach drops. Requests, he repeats. Or commands. The steward's smile is thin. Does it matter? Lucen should say yes. But he follows. The hall of nocturnes looks different in the dim daylight. Less like a dream, more like an ancient mausoleum. The moonlight is gone, replaced by gray light that makes everything sharper, less forgiving. The dust still floats, but now it looks like evidence. Saralith stands by the arched window, her silhouette framed by pale sky. She looks composed again, crown on, shoulders straight, gown immaculate. Only her eyes give away that something has changed. They are watching him not as a curiosity now, but as a complication. Lucen stops a respectful distance away. You wanted to see me? Saralith turns slowly. The movement is regal, practiced. Yes, she says, because you did something you had no right to do. Lucen's shoulders tense. Saving you. Saralith's gaze sharpens, touching a covenant. Lucen's mouth tightens. I didn't know it was a covenant. I saw someone collapsing and something wrong in the room. Saralith steps closer. The air seems to cool around her, as if her presence edits temperature. You drew a symbol on my brow, she says, with moonstone water. Lucen nods, uneasy. Ah, yes. Saralith's voice drops. Do you know what moonstone water is used for here? Lucen shakes his head. It is used to seal names, she says, to bind promises, to mark souls. Lucen's pulse quickens. I know, Saralith says, and there is something almost human in the way she says it, like she is forcing herself to acknowledge intent. She lifts a hand and, with 2 fingers, touches her own forehead where Lucen's mark had been. The mark is gone, but she remembers it. You interrupted an ancient claim, she says. The Night Court felt it. They will wonder how. Lucen's throat tightens. So my little circle made me a target. Saralith's lips curve, slightly humorless. You were already a target the moment you enter my palace. Humans always are. Lucen's eyes harden. Then why invite us? Saralith's gaze flickers, an admission, sharp and fleeting. Because we need you, she says quietly, even when we pretend we do not. Lucen stares at her, the weight of her words settling like dust. Saralith steps closer until he can see the fine detail of her face. The faint shadows beneath her eyes that no immortal should have. The tiny crease at her brow, where worry has begun to live. I summoned you, she says, because I must decide what to do with you. Lucen's hands curl into fists. Is that supposed to be comforting? Saralith's silver eyes lock onto his. No, she says. It is supposed to be honest. A pause. Then she speaks again, and the words feel like a blade drawn slowly from a sheath. The Night Court does not take what is protected. Lucen swallows. Protected by whom? Saralith's gaze does not waver. By someone who is willing to bleed for it, she says. Lucen lets out a short, disbelieving breath. You're suggesting I protect you. Saralith's voice is quiet, almost reluctant. I am suggesting, she says, that you have already begun. Lucen feels the world tilt, because in that moment, he understands the shape of the trap. If he walks away, Saralith may die, or worse, be taken into a covenant that turns her reign into a puppet show for something ancient. If he stays, he becomes involved in a war he cannot understand, against enemies he cannot see, in a palace where his heartbeat marks him as prey. Lucen looks at the queen, at her composure, her danger, her loneliness. Why me, he asks. Saralith's answer is not what he expects. Because you looked at me, she says, and saw a life worth saving. Lucen's chest tightens. He does not know what to say to that, so he says the only thing he can. Tell me what you need. And in the gray daylight of the Hall of Nocturnes, the vampire queen's mask cracks, not with weakness, but with something fiercer. Hope. From that moment, the palace changes its relationship with Lucen. He is no longer a guest. He is not a prisoner. He becomes a presence, watched, whispered about, judged in corridors and mirrored halls. The vampires see him as an insult. A human close to their queen is like mud on a crown. The witches see him as an omen. Humans do not touch moonstone water and live without consequence. The palace servants, old creatures whose loyalties are more to the stone than any throne, watch it with eyes that have seen kings die. Lucen feels it all like heat under skin, but Saralith, in her silent way, makes space for him. She assigns him quarters closer to her chambers, not as a reward, but as practicality. She brings him into private councils with her most trusted advisors, an ancient vampire general named Varos, whose armor looks fused to his body, a witch diplomat named Maren, whose eyes reflect candle flames even in darkness, and a scholar priest called Edrin, who serves the palace's forgotten chapel and speaks with the careful diction of someone who knows words can kill. They do not welcome Lucen, but they do not challenge the queen's decision openly. Not yet. Saralith speaks of the Night Court in fragments, as if naming it too much would invite it closer. She describes it as a court without bodies, a parliament of shadows that live between oaths. It does not hunger for blood. It hungers for obedience. For rulers bound by promises, so old they feel like law. Lucen listens, mind struggling to hold a concept an enemy that is not a creature, but a contract. How do you fight an oath? He asks. Maren answers before Seralith can. You do not fight it, she says, voice like silk over steel. You outright it. Lucen frowns. Outright. Edrin nods slowly. A covenant is a story, he says. It says, this belongs to that. This must happen. This will be paid. Lucen looks at Seralith. And you need a different story. Seralith's silver eyes flicker. Yes, she says. Varro scoffs, disgusted. A human cannot rewrite a covenant written in immortal blood. Lucen stiffens. No blood, he says, remembering the chapel. Varros's gaze sharpens. Do not correct me, human. Seralith raises a hand slightly. Varros falls silent immediately, but the contempt remains in his eyes. Seralith looks at Lucen. You marked me, she says, without knowing the ritual. Yet the night court recoiled. Lucen swallows. So what does that mean? Edrin's voice is quiet. It means your gesture carried something they did not account for. Maren's eyes narrow. Or someone. Lucen's skin prickles. Seralith's gaze holds his, steady and intense. You are human, she says, and yet you made them hesitate. Lucen feels the weight of that, heavy as stone. Then Seralith speaks the words that change everything. There is a place beneath this palace, she says, where the first covenant was signed, the chamber of first ink. Varros's expression darkens. My queen. Seralith cuts him off. We will go. Maren's lips part slightly. It has been sealed for centuries. Seralith's voice is iron. Then we will unseal it. Lucen's stomach tightens. And what's down there? Edrin's eyes look almost sad. The truth, he says. Lucen exhales slowly, because he realizes saving Seralith's life was not the end of the story. It was the opening scene. The descent begins at midnight, when the palace is quiet enough to hear its own bones. Seralith does not bring an army. She brings only those she trusts not to panic. Varros, Maren, Edrin, and Lucen. Lucen carries a lantern, not because vampires need light, but because humans do, and perhaps because a small flame is a kind of defiance in a place made of shadows. They move through corridors that curve too gently, staircases that spiral downward through cold stone, doors sealed with symbols Lucen cannot read. Maren murmurs words under her breath, and locks that have not moved in centuries click open like obedient teeth. The air grows colder. Older. Dust thickens. The smell changes from roses and velvet to stone and something like dried ink. Finally, they reach a door of black iron, engraved with a circle and a line through it. Lucen's breath catches. It is his mother's mark, the one he drew on Seralith's brow. He looks at Edrin, shaken. That symbol. Edrin's eyes widen slightly. Where did you learn it? Lucen swallows. My mother used it, he says. When I was sick. She said it meant the fever ends here. Maren's expression shifts, suddenly sharp with suspicion. Your mother was a witch. Lucen shakes his head violently. No, she was a midwife, a healer. She barely knew how to read. Seralith's gaze fixes on the symbol, as if seeing it for the first time. That mark, she murmurs, is older than witches. Varros's hand goes to his sword, though steel looks foolish in this place. Edrin touches the iron door reverently. It is the seal of return, he whispers. A ward against the night court. A promise written not to bind, but to bring back. Lucen's skin crawls. Bring back what? Edrin looks at him. Those who have been claimed. He says. Silence presses in. Seralith's silver eyes burn. Open it, she commands. Maren speaks a spell. The door groans, not from rust, but from reluctance. It swings inward, and the darkness beyond is not empty. It is watching. The chamber of first ink is circular, its walls carved with endless text. Odes, names, sigils, histories written into stone. The floor is obsidian, polished so it reflects like black water. In the center stands a table of pale bone, and on that table lies an object that looks impossibly simple. A quill, a real quill, black-feathered, with a silver nib. Beside it sits a small vial of ink that shimmers like liquid night. Lucen steps forward slowly, lantern held high. The flame trembles, as if afraid. Saralitha's voice is almost reverent. "That is the first quill," she says. "The instrument used to write covenants into existence." Varro spits softly. "Destroy it." Edrin shakes his head. "It cannot be destroyed," he says. "Only used." Moren's gaze slides toward Lucen. "And now," she murmurs, "we know why the human mattered." Lucen's heart pounds. "What are you talking about?" Saralith turns to him. Her face is pale, her eyes luminous. "Lucen," she says, voice low, "your mark opened this door." Lucen stares, breath shallow. "I didn't do anything." "You did," Saralith says, "without knowing, like in the chapel." Lucen's mouth goes dry. "So what does that mean?" Edrin answers, almost reluctantly. "It means," he says, "you are a returner." Lucen laughs once, harsh and scared. "That's not a thing." Moren's expression is cold. "It is a thing," she says, "a rare thing. A human soul that resists being written over. A soul that can interrupt fate." Lucen looks at Saralith, terrified by the weight of her attention. "So, you brought me down here to, what?" "Write something." Saralith steps closer. Her presence fills the chamber. "I brought you here," she says, "because the only ink that can rewrite a covenant is human choice." Lucen's fingers tighten around the lantern handle until it hurts. "You want me to rewrite your life," he says. Saralitha's voice softens, just slightly. "I want you to help me claim it," she says. A tremor runs through the chamber. Not an earthquake, but something like laughter in the stone. The text on the walls seems to shimmer. The night court has noticed them, and it is not pleased. The shadows gather the edges of the chamber, thickening like storm clouds. Lucen feels it again, that pressure, that invisible grip around the lungs. But this time, Saralith does not falter. She stands tall, crown gleaming faintly, eyes blazing. "Show yourself," she says. The shadows ripple. A voice speaks, not from one place, but from every carved oath in the wall. Saralith knocks. The sound of her name is like chains dragged over stone. Lucen's stomach twists. The voice continues. "You are bound." Saralith's jaw tightens. Not forever. The shadows shift, forming something like a silhouette, tall, thin, crowned with nothing but darkness. The covenant stands. Lucen's lantern flame gutters, almost extinguished. Edrin whispers, "Do not answer with fear." Lucen barely hears him. His heartbeat is too loud. Saralith turns her head slightly toward Lucen, without taking her eyes off the shadow. "Lucen," she says softly, "if you are to do this, you must do it now." Lucen's hands shake. "Do what?" Saralitha's gaze flickers to the quill. "Right," she says. Lucen stares at the quill as if it is a weapon. The shadow voice deepens. "Human." Lucen flinches. The word is spoken like a slur. "You do not belong here." Lucen swallows hard. He thinks of his mother's hand on his brow, the simple circle and line, the promise that sickness could end. He thinks of how powerless humans are in the stories vampires tell about them. He thinks of how Saralith looked in the chapel. How, for a heartbeat, she had looked like someone who could be saved. He steps toward the table. Varro snarls, "Do not touch it." Saralitha's hand lifts, silencing Varro's again. Lucen sets the lantern down. Its flame casts trembling light across the quill. His fingers hover over it. The shadow voice hisses, "If you write, you are seen." Lucen looks up at the silhouette. "I'm already seen," he says, voice rough. "I walked into your trap, and I'm still standing." The shadows pulse, angry. Lucen grips the quill. It is cold, not like metal, like winter air. He dips it into the ink. The ink clings like darkness that wants to be held. "Write what?" Lucen demands. Saralith steps to his side, close enough that he can feel her chill presence, her steady breath. Write truth, she says. Write what you did. Lucen's brow furrows. I saved you. Serelith nods. Then write. The humans saved the queen. Lucen hesitates. That sounds arrogant, he mutters. Serelith's lips curve faintly. Covenants are arrogant. They assume the world will obey. We must be just as bold. Lucen's hand trembles. Then he presses the quill to the obsidian floor. The ink does not spread like normal ink. It burns into the stone, glowing faintly like a fresh scar. Lucen writes the words slowly, as if carving them into fate. A human saved her life. The chamber shudders. The shadow silhouette recoils as if struck. And oh, it hisses, voice cracking like splitting ice. Lucen feels something snap, an invisible tension released. Serelith gasps softly, not in pain but in something like relief. The text on the walls flickers. The shadow voice rises in fury. You cannot unwrite what is paid. Lucen's jaw tightens. He looks at Serelith. What was paid? Serelith's voice is quiet. My freedom, she says, in exchange for her kingdom. Lucen's stomach twists. Your mother's kingdom. Serelith nods. Yes. Lucen looks back at the shadow. Then I'll write a different payment, he says. Moren's eyes widen. Human, be careful. Lucen ignores her. He dips the quill again. He writes. No life is owed for another's crown. The ink glows brighter, almost white at the edges. The shadow silhouette convulses, its shape unraveling. You dare. Lucen's voice shakes, but he keeps writing. He writes what his mother would have called stubborn goodness. He writes what a tired traveler would call fairness. He writes what an immortal court has forgotten. A queen is not a sacrifice. The chamber trembles violently. The shadow voice screams, not in sound, but in pressure, in the tightening of air, in the urge to collapse. Lucen's knees buckle, but Serelith's hand closes around his arm, steadying him. Her grip is cold, but strong. Keep going, she whispers. Lucen's eyes sting. He doesn't know why, fear, pressure, or something like awe. He writes the final line with shaking hands. She belongs to herself. The ink flares. For a heartbeat, the chamber is flooded with light. Moonlight not from any window, but from the words themselves. The shadow silhouette shatters like smoke blown apart by wind. The pressure vanishes. Silence slams down, heavy and complete. Lucen drops the quill, breathing hard. His whole body aches as if he ran for days. Serelith stands beside him, her silver eyes shining with something that looks dangerously close to tears, though none fall. Edrin whispers, voice trembling with reverence. You have rewritten the covenant, he says. Moren stares at Lucen, as if he has become a new kind of creature. Varos looks furious, unsettled, almost afraid. Lucen turns his head slowly towards Serelith. So are you free? Serelith touches her throat, her chest, as if feeling for invisible chains that were always there. Then she lifts her chin. Yes, she says. Her voice breaks slightly on the word, not from weakness, but from the shock of saying it. Freedom. The vampire queen is free. And in the depth of the palace, the night court has been defied. Lucen should feel victorious. Instead, dread coils in his gut, because he knows no ancient power accepts humiliation quietly. He looks at the carved walls, at the O's shimmering faintly. What happens now, he asks. Serelith's gaze turns toward the darkness beyond the open door. Now, she says, voice low and steady, they will come for you. The days that follow are not filled with bloodshed or battles in torchlit corridors. They are worse. They are filled with politics, with whispers that move faster than footsteps, with fear disguised as tradition. The vampire court fractures along invisible lines. Some nobles insist the queen has been tainted by human interference. Some claim she is bewitched. Some secretly fear the night court's retaliation and want Serelith to submit again to avoid catastrophe. Humans at the palace, merchants, envoys, servants, begin to sense a shift. They see a human man walking beside the queen, close enough to speak to her without being punished, and they feel something they have not felt in generations. Possibility. And possibility is dangerous. Serelith is not sentimental. She does not suddenly become kind. She remains a queen, sharp, controlled, formidable. But now, when she looks at Lucen, she looks as if she has seen the edge of a door she never knew existed. Lucen, meanwhile, becomes a symbol he never asked to be. Some vampires glare at him as if he is a disease. Some watch him with cold curiosity. Some, disturbingly, begin to treat him with a kind of respect that feels like hunger. Lucen hates it all. He is not a hero. He is a man who delivered a letter and then made a stupid choice in a chapel. But his stupid choice has shifted 1,000 years of power. And now the night court moves, not with violence, with temptation. On the third night after the rewriting, Lucen begins to dream. In the dream, he stands in a corridor of endless doors. Each door has his name carved on it in a different handwriting. Behind some doors, he hears laughter. Behind others, sobbing. Behind one, he hears his mother singing a lullaby he has not heard since childhood. A voice speaks from behind him. Returner. Lucen turns and sees a figure made of shadow, wearing a crown that looks like a halo of ink. You have written. The figure says, now be written. Lucen wakes sweating, heart racing, the taste of ink in his mouth. The next day, he finds a small black feather on his pillow. Not from any bird he recognizes. Serelith, when he shows her, does not look surprised. They are courting you, she says. Lucen's stomach twists. Courting? Maren, standing nearby, speaks coldly. The night court does not only punish, she says. It recruits. Lucen's mouth goes dry. Why would they want me? Serelith's eyes narrow. Because you can do what they cannot, she says. You can return what they claim. You can unravel covenants. Lucen's chest tightens. I don't want that. Serelith's gaze softens slightly, almost imperceptibly. I know, she says. And then quietly she adds, that is why you are dangerous to them. As tension rises, Serelith makes a decision that shocks her court even more than Lucen's presence. She offers Lucen protection, not in secret, not as a hidden ally, but openly, publicly. In the throne hall, before her nobles, she speaks. Lucen Arlo is under my shadow. The phrase is an ancient vampire declaration. It means, harm him and you harm the crown. Vampires is in outrage. Varos's face hardens. Maren's eyes gleam with calculated satisfaction. Lucen stands beside Serelith, feeling 100 immortal gazes like knives. After the court disperses, Lucen confronts her in private. You didn't have to do that, he says. Serelith's silver eyes meet his. Yes, she says. I did. Lucen shakes his head, frustrated. You're making me a target. Serelith steps closer, her voice low. You were already a target, she says. But now you are not alone. Lucen laughs bitterly. I'm in a palace full of vampires. That's not alone. That's trapped. Serelith's gaze sharpens. Do you think I do not understand trapped? She asks. The words hit harder than any threat. Lucen's anger falters. Serelith's voice softens. You saved my life, she says. Not because it benefited you. Not because you were told to. But because you chose to. Lucen looks away. It was instinct. Serelith shakes her head slightly. Instinct is hunger, she says. What you did was something else. She pauses. I am a queen, she says. I am bound by symbols, by expectations, by the fear of my own court. But you are bound only by your own conscience. Lucen looks at her, confused by the strange admiration in her voice. Serelith's silver eyes glint. And that, she says, is why the night court fears you. The night court's next move is not an attack on Lucen. It is an attack on Serelith's reputation. Whispers spread through the palace, through allied courts, through distant lands. Stories mutate. The human has bewitched the queen. The queen has fallen in love with her pet human. The queen has lost her mind. The queen is weak. Serelith responds not with denial, but with a cold tightening of rule. She makes examples of gossipers. She strengthens alliances. She moves like a chess player who knows the opponent is invisible but still present. Lucen watches her and realizes something unsettling. Serelith is not just fighting for her life. She is fighting for her identity. And for the first time, Lucen sees the queen not as a predator, but as a ruler carrying a weight that no one else in the palace can lift. One night, as they stand by the arched windows watching the moon climb, Lucen speaks without thinking. You don't have anyone, he says. Saralith's gaze shifts sharp. I have a court. That's not what I mean, Lucen says quietly. You have subjects, advisors, guards, but no one you could be weak in front of. Saralith is silent for a long moment. Then she says, barely audible, queens who show weakness do not remain queens. Lucen's chest tightens. He looks at her profile, pale skin, dark hair, silver eyes reflecting moonlight. You were weak in front of me, he says. Saralith's jaw tightens. I did not choose it. Lucen nods. Maybe not, but you survived it. Saralith turns her head slightly, looking at him with an expression that is not quite anger, not quite gratitude. It is something like recognition, as if she is realizing that being seen does not always mean being destroyed. The night court comes for Lucen on the seventh night, not in dreams, not in whispers. In reality, it happens in a corridor lined with mirrors. Lucen is returning to his quarters when the mirrors begin to darken, one by one, their reflections swallowed. The air grows thick. His breath fogs. He reaches for the small dagger he carries, laughable against ancient shadow. But the corridor is already changing. The mirrors no longer show his face. They show doors, endless doors. And from one mirror, a shadow hand reaches out, fingers long and ink black. Lucen stumbles back, heart pounding. A voice pours from a glass. Returner. Lucen's throat tightens. No. The shadow hand spreads, as if offering something. You have tasted power. Lucen shakes his head violently. I didn't want it. The voice hums, amused. You wrote freedom for a queen. Right for U.S. Lucen backs away, but the corridor seems to stretch, making escape impossible. What do you want? He demands, voice cracking. The mirrors ripple. A scene appears. A village burning, people screaming, a child crying in a doorway. Lucen's breath catches. It is his village, the one he left years ago. The voice speaks softly, almost kindly. Write them safe. Lucen's hands shake. He knows temptation when he sees it. He has lived poor enough to recognize the shape of a bargain. You can't do that, he whispers. We can, the voice replies. With you. Lucen's chest tightens. His village had been starving last winter. His sister's last letter had spoken of sickness, of failing crops. The night court shows him another mirror, his sister lying pale in bed, eyes half closed. Lucen's knees nearly buckle. Write her well, the voice coos. Lucen's eyes sting. He clenches his fists until his nails bite skin. I won't, he whispers. The mirrors darken, anger rising. Then we will take what you love anyway. Lucen's voice breaks. I don't have anything. The voice pauses. Then, with cruel precision, it says, You have the queen. Lucen's breath stops. In the mirrors, Saralith appears, standing alone in the hall of nocturnes, her silver eyes wide with the same shock as that first night. The shadow voice purrs. Ride her back into chains. Lucen's body trembles. He feels the pull, the seductive ease of surrendering, of letting the ancient power decide. Then he remembers the chapel. Saralith collapsing, her whispered warning. Leave. The way she had looked, not like a monster, but like someone drowning. Lucen lifts his head. No, he says again, stronger. The mirrors vibrate, furious. You are human. You cannot withstand U.S. Lucen's voice turns into a growl. I'm human, he says. That's the point. I'm not yours to write. The shadow hand lunges, and the corridor explodes with silver light. Saralith appears at the end of the hall, moving like a storm-given form. Her gown sweeps behind her like night itself. Her eyes are blazing. In her hand is a blade that is not metal but moonlight, an ancient vampire relic forged to cut enchantments, not flesh. She thrusts it toward the nearest mirror. The glass shatters, not outward, but inward, as if the mirror is collapsing into itself. The shadow screams. Saralith's voice is cold and furious. You will not touch what is under my shadow. The corridor fills with cracking, shattering sounds as mirrors break one by one, spilling darkness that evaporates in her silver light. Lucen stumbles, covering his face from flying shards. When the last mirror collapses, silence returns, thick and trembling. Lucen looks up. Sarah stands before him, breathing steady, expression controlled. But her eyes are wild with something like fear. Not for herself. For him. You should not have come, Lucen whispers. Saralitha's jaw tightens. Yes, she says. I should have. She steps closer, her gaze scanning him as if checking for invisible wounds. Did they touch you? She demands. Lucen swallows. Not physically. Saralitha's expression darkens. That is worse. Lucen laughs shakily. They offer me my village. My sister. They threatened you. Saralitha's eyes narrow. And what did you say? Lucen meets her gaze. I said no, he says. For a heartbeat, Saralitha's mask slips. Something soft breaks through. Pride. And relief, so sharp, it almost hurts to look at. Then she steps closer, and does something no vampire, Noble would ever believe. She cups his face with her cold hand, just for a moment, grounding him. Good, she whispers. Lucen's breath catches at the touch. Then she lowers her hand, as if she has revealed too much. Her voice turns firm again. They will not stop, she says. They will escalate. Lucen's throat tightens. So, what do we do? Saralith looks down the shattered corridor, at the broken mirrors, at the remnants of shadow evaporating like smoke. Then she looks back at Lucen, silver eyes hard with decision. We end this, she says. How? Lucen asks. Saralitha's gaze turns toward the palace's deepest towers, where the oldest balcony faces a moon. By giving them what they want, she says. Lucen's blood runs cold. They want me, he says. Saralitha's voice is quiet. They want a returner, she says. But not just any returner. Lucen's heart pounds. What do you mean? Saralitha's eyes gleam, dangerous. They want you to write for them willingly, she says. To become their quill. Lucen swallows hard. I won't. Saralith nods. I know, she says. So we will use your refusal as a weapon. Lucen stares. I don't understand. Saralitha's voice drops. The Night Court cannot take what is freely given, she says. But they can claim what is freely offered. Lucen's stomach twists. You're saying we offer something and trap them with it. Saralitha's lips curve, slightly predatory and regal. Yes, she says. We invite them to bargain. And we rewrite the bargain in the moment they reach for it. Lucen's mouth goes dry. That sounds like suicide. Saralitha's silver eyes hold his. I have ruled for centuries, she says. I have survived wars, betrayals, hunger, and time itself. I did not survive all of that to be owned by an oath. Her voice softens. And you did not survive your human life, she adds, to become ink. Lucen's chest tightens at the strange tenderness in her words. He nods slowly. Tell me what to do, he says. Saralith turns toward the moonlit balcony. Come, she says. And together, Vampire Queen and Human Returner walk deeper into the palace, toward the final scene they are about to write. On the balcony, the night is vast. The moon hangs heavy, silver and watchful, like an eye that has seen too much. Below, the palace grounds stretch like a dark sea of stone and garden. Statues stand in silent prayer. Trees sway gently. The world feels impossibly calm for a night on the edge of war. Saralith stands at the balcony's edge, her gown stirring in the wind. Lucen stands beside her, feeling small under the sky. Edrin, Maren, and Varro stand behind them, tense. Edrin holds a book bound in pale leather, the Book of First Ink, containing the oldest recorded covenants. Maren's hands glow faintly with warding magic. Varro's grips his sword like it is the only truth left. Saralith lifts her chin and speaks into the night. Night Court, she says, voice carrying like a bell. You have hunted me with oaths and shadows. Come now, speak plainly. For a moment, nothing happens. Then the air shifts. The moonlight dims. The space above the balcony thickens like ink poured into water. Shadows gather, swirling, forming a presence that makes the world feel suddenly smaller. A voice speaks, layered, ancient. Seralith knocks. Seralith does not flinch. Returner, the voice adds, turning toward Lucen, even though it has no eyes. Lucen's stomach clenches, but he stands still. Seralith's voice is cold. You tried to claim me, she says. I refused. Now you try to claim him. He is unbound, the voice murmurs. Lucen's jaw tightens. I'm not yours. The shadows pulse with amusement. All things can be written. Seralith steps closer to the darkness. Then bargain, she says. The shadows still. Bargain. The voice repeats, tasting the word. Seralith gestures toward Edrin. Edrin steps forward and opens a book of first ink, pages fluttering as if nervous. Seralith speaks clearly. I offer covenant, she says. One written now, witnessed by my court and by yours. Varos bristles, but does not interrupt. The voice hums. What do you offer? Seralith's silver eyes gleam. I offer you a story, she says. One you will want. The shadows lean in. Lucen's mouth goes dry. He watches Seralith, trying to understand how she can look so calm while standing on the edge of something ancient and hungry. Seralith continues. You want the returner, she says. You want his will, his hand, his ink. The shadows ripple. Yes. Seralith's voice drops, almost intimate. Then I offer you this, she says. One single written act from his hand. One truth made permanent. Lucen's breath catches. Moren's eyes widen slightly, but she stays silent. Edrin's fingers tighten on the book. Varos looks like he might explode. The shadows pulse, greedy. And in return, Seralith lifts her chin. In return, she says, you will leave my realm forever. You will release every claim you have on my line, on my palace, on my crown. The shadows hiss, uncertain. You ask much. Seralith's smile is thin. And you want much, she replies. Lucen's heart pounds. He whispers to Seralith, barely moving his lips. What are you doing? Seralith does not look at him, but her voice comes back softly. Trust me, she murmurs. The shadows churn. We accept, the voice says at last, eager. Let him write. Edrin looks at Seralith, waiting. Seralith nods. Edrin holds out the book of first ink toward Lucen, opening to a blank page that seems to drink moonlight. Lucen's hand trembles as he takes the quill. It is the same quill, cold as winter. Lucen looks at Seralith. Her silver eyes meet his, steady. Now he understands. This is a trap. He will write something that the Night Court wants, but he will write it in a way they do not anticipate. Lucen dips the quill into the ink Edrin offers. The shadows hum with anticipation. Write, the voice commands. Lucen breathes in. He thinks of his village, his sister, his mother's hand on his brow. He thinks of Seralith, proud, dangerous, lonely, refusing to be owned. He thinks of the Night Court's arrogance. All things can be written. Lucen lowers the quill and writes, slowly, clearly, with all the stubborn power of a human refusing fate. I will never write for the Night Court. The ink flares. The shadows freeze. For a heartbeat, silence. Then the Night Court screams, not in sound, but in the sudden crushing pressure rage, the way an ocean might rage at a dam. Treachery. Seralith's voice cuts through the chaos like a blade. It is truth, she says. You demanded a written act. He gave you the only act he will ever give you. The shadows convulse, trying to undo the words, trying to unwrite refusal. But the covenant is sealed, because it was freely written, because it was witnessed, because it is now part of the book of first ink. Edrin's voice shakes with awe. It is done, he whispers. Moren raises her hands, casting wards that glow like glass in moonlight. Varos steps forward, sword drawn, as if ready to cut shadow itself. The Night Court thrashes, trapped by the logic of its own hunger. You have made us powerless. Seralith's silver eyes blaze. No, she says. I have reminded you that you cannot own what refuses. The shadows recoil, unraveling like ink washed away. But before they vanish completely, the voice speaks one last time, low and venomous. Returner, you will regret your humanity. And then the night snaps back into normalcy. Moonlight returns. Wind sighs. The palace stands. Lucen drops the quill, hand shaking. His knees almost buckle, but Serelith catches his arm, steadying him the way he steadied her. For a long moment, they stand together, breathing, the world suddenly fragile. Lucen looks at Serelith, voice hoarse. Is it over? Serelith's gaze lifts to the moon. Yes, she says. For us. Lucen swallows. For us? Serelith turns to him. Her silver eyes are softened now, almost luminous with relief. You freed me from my mother's bargain, she says. And tonight, you freed yourself from theirs. Lucen exhales shakily. So I can leave. Serelith's expression stills. You can, she says. The words are simple, but the space around them fills with everything unspoken. Lucen looks at her, at the vampire queen who had been shocked by humanity, who looked vulnerable in moonlight, who had been saved not by violence but by compassion. He realizes something that feels like heartbreak. He has become part of her story, and she has become part of his. Leaving would be easy in the way running away is easy, quick, instinctive, survival. Staying would be hard. Staying would mean building something new in a world that prefers old monsters and old fear. Lucen's voice is quiet. What happens to your court now? He asks. Serelith's gaze turns inward, calculating. They will test me, she says. They will see if I am weakened by this. Lucen nods slowly. And the humans outside? Serelith's eyes narrow. They will hear rumors, she says. They will fear, or they will hope. Lucen breathes out, and Serelith looks at him, and for once there is no performance in her face. I will rule, she says, but differently. Lucen's throat tightens. He thinks of his mother again, her simple mark, her belief that sickness could end if someone stayed long enough to help. He looks at Serelith. He makes a choice. I'll stay, he says. Varro stiffens. Moren's lips curve faintly, satisfied. Edrin closes a book of first ink, as if sealing the moment itself. Serelith's silver eyes widen, just slightly, the faint echo of that original shock. Why? She asks softly, as if afraid of the answer. Lucen's voice is steady. Because someone saved me once, he says. And I didn't understand it then either. But I think this is what it was for. Serelith holds his gaze. Then, slowly, she inclines her head. Not a bow, not submission, but acknowledgement. A queen recognizing a human not as prey, not as tool, but as an equal force of will. Then remain, she says, under my shadow, not as protection. Her voice lowers. As partnership. The wind rises, stirring her dark hair. Moonlight glints off her crown like a promise. Lucen nods, and in that moment, the ancient Gothic palace feels less like a tomb and more like the beginning of a new kingdom, one built not on blood, but on the startling, dangerous power of unexpected humanity.
Years later, historians will argue about what truly happened that night. Some will claim the vampire queen was weakened by love. Some will claim the human was bewitched. Some will whisper that the night court still waits in the cracks between promises, patient as ever. But the people who live through it will remember something simpler. They will remember the moment the vampire queen stood in moonlight, shocked and vulnerable. They will remember the human man who held her carefully, not with dominance but with protection. They will remember that no blood was spilled, no violence performed, no monster slain. Only a choice made, a human choice. And they will remember the word written into the book of first ink words that become the foundation of a new era. She belongs to herself, and I will never write for the night court. In a world of immortal bargains, those sentences were more powerful than any sword, because they prove that even in the ancient Gothic palaces, under the cold gaze of the moon, survival can look like compassion, and gratitude can look like a queen learning for the first time how to